What happens when one of the biggest pop stars in the world sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to have the host cross a line that ignites an explosive confrontation? Tonight, we're diving deep into the shocking clash that ended with Rihanna storming off Jimmy Kimmel Live, leaving the audience stunned and the host scrambling to save face. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral when egos collide and boundaries get shattered. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you won't believe how this unfolds. The tension was palpable from the moment Rihanna walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage. She looked absolutely stunning in her customs Valentino dress, her confidence radiating as she waved to the cheering crowd. But there was something different about her energy tonight, something that seasoned viewers of late-night television might have picked up on. Her smile seemed a bit more forced than usual, her movements slightly more calculated. Jimmy, ever the showman, greeted her with his trademark enthusiasm, but even he seemed to sense that this interview might not go according to his carefully prepared script. "Rihanna, welcome back to the show," Jimmy said as they settled into their chairs. The audience was still buzzing with excitement, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. "You look incredible as always, and I have to say, the fans outside were absolutely losing their minds when they saw you arrive." Rihanna's response was polite but measured. "Thank you, Jimmy. It's always interesting coming back here." The word interesting hung in the air with a weight that Jimmy either didn't catch or chose to ignore. She adjusted herself in the chair, crossing her legs with the kind of grace that comes from years of being in the spotlight, but her eyes never quite met his with the warmth that viewers had come to expect from their previous interactions. Jimmy launched into his first question with the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. "So let's talk about your new business ventures. You've built this incredible empire with Fenty Beauty, Savage X Fenty, and now you're expanding even further. Some people are saying you're moving away from music permanently. Is that true?" The question seemed innocent enough, the kind of inquiry that any entertainment journalist might pose to a multifaceted celebrity. But Rihanna's reaction was immediate and telling. Her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, and when she spoke, there was an edge to her voice that cut through the studio's carefully controlled atmosphere. "Some people say a lot of things, Jimmy. That doesn't make them true or worth repeating." Her response was sharp, direct, and completely unlike the playful banter that usually characterized celebrity talk show appearances. The audience shifted, uncomfortably, sensing the change in energy, but not yet understanding its source. Jimmy, perhaps thinking he could lighten the mood with humor, pressed forward with what he probably thought was a clever follow-up. "Well, I mean, when was the last time you were actually in a recording studio? Because I heard from some industry insiders that you haven't been near a microphone in months." This was the moment when the interview began to derail, though Jimmy still seemed oblivious to the danger he was walking into. Rihanna's expression hardened, and for a split second, the mask of celebrity politeness slipped completely. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a tone that anyone who knew her well would recognize as a warning. "Industry insiders?" she repeated, the words dripping with skepticism. "Jimmy, are we really going to do this? Are we going to sit here and pretend like you don't know exactly what's been going on?" The confusion on Jimmy's face was genuine, which only seemed to make Rihanna more frustrated. She had clearly come onto the show expecting him to understand something that he was either genuinely ignorant about or deliberately avoiding. The audience was now completely silent. The usual energy of a late-night talk show replaced by something much more volatile and unpredictable. "I'm not sure what you mean," Jimmy said, his smile becoming more strained as he realized this wasn't going to be the easy promotional interview he had planned for. "I was just asking about your music career because your fans are always wondering when the next album is coming." Rihanna laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was the kind of laugh that comes before someone says something they've been holding back for far too long. "My fans know exactly where I stand, Jimmy. They don't need you or anyone else speaking for them or making assumptions about what I'm doing with my time." The host was clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. He glanced toward his producers offstage, a move that Rihanna caught immediately. "Don't look at them," she said firmly. "Look at me. If you have something to say, say it to me directly instead of hiding behind these softball questions." Jimmy's attempt to deflect with humor fell completely flat. "I wasn't hiding behind anything. I was just trying to give our viewers an update on what you've been working on lately. This is usually the part where celebrities talk about their projects." "Usually," Rihanna repeated, her voice rising slightly. "But this isn't usual, is it, Jimmy? Because usually, you don't invite someone on your show just to question their work ethic and imply that they're not doing their job." The accusation hit Jimmy like a slap. His carefully maintained composure began to crack as he realized that whatever had triggered Rihanna's anger was something much deeper than a simple misunderstanding about interview questions. The audience was now completely captivated, witnessing something that felt more real and raw than anything they had ever seen on late-night television. "I never questioned your work ethic," Jimmy protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I have nothing but respect for everything you've accomplished." Rihanna stood up abruptly, her movement so sudden that it caused Jimmy to instinctively lean back in his chair. "Respect?" she said, her voice now carrying clearly across the silent studio. "Jimmy, if you respected me, you wouldn't have agreed to this ambush in the first place." The word ambush sent shockwaves through everyone present. Whatever this was about, it was clearly something that had been planned or coordinated behind the scenes, something that Rihanna felt betrayed by, and Jimmy was either part of or completely unaware of. The host's face went pale as the full weight of the accusation settled over him. "Rihanna, I swear to you I don't know what you're talking about," Jimmy said, standing up as well, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "If someone told you that I was planning something, they lied to you. This was supposed to be a normal interview." But Rihanna was beyond the point of believing anything he had to say. Her eyes blazed with a fury that seemed to have been building for much longer than just the few minutes they had been on stage together. "You want to know what this is really about?" Rihanna's voice cut through the stunned silence like a knife. She took a step closer to Jimmy's desk, her presence commanding every bit of attention in the room. "This is about the phone call your producer made to my team 3 days ago. The one where they specifically asked about my personal life, my relationships, my private business that has nothing to do with why I agreed to come on this show." Jimmy's face went from pale to completely white. He looked genuinely shocked, his eyes darting toward the wings where his production team was stationed. "What phone call? I don't know anything about any phone call." "Of course you don't," Rihanna said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Because you're just the host, right? You just show up and read the cards and pretend like you don't know that. Your people have been digging around in my business, trying to find dirt to make good television." The audience was completely transfixed. This wasn't the sanitized, pre-planned drama they were used to seeing on talk shows. This was real anger, real betrayal, and it was happening right in front of them. Some people had their phones out, recording what they clearly recognized as a once-in-a-lifetime television moment. Jimmy held up his hands, his voice taking on a pleading quality. "Rihanna, I swear on everything I hold dear, I had no idea about any phone call. If my producers overstepped, that's on them, not on me. I would never approve of that kind of intrusion into your privacy." "Wouldn't you?" she challenged, moving even closer to his desk. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been perfectly happy to benefit from that intrusion. All those questions about my music career, about what I'm doing with my time, about industry insiders. Those weren't random questions, Jimmy. Those were fishing expeditions." The host was clearly struggling to process what was happening. His years of experience handling difficult interviews seemed to evaporate in the face of Rihanna's raw fury. "I prepare questions based on what I think the audience wants to know. That's my job." Your job, Rihanna repeated, shaking her head in disgust. Let me tell you what your job should be. Your job should be to treat your guests with basic human decency. Your job should be to respect the boundaries that we set when we agree to come on your show. Your job should not be to ambush people who trusted you enough to sit in that chair. Jimmy looked desperately toward his production team, clearly, hoping for some kind of intervention or guidance, but none came. He was on his own, facing down one of the most powerful women in entertainment who had clearly reached her breaking point. I understand you're upset, he said, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. But can we please sit down and talk about this like adults? The audience doesn't need to see us fighting like this. That was exactly the wrong thing to say. Rihanna's eyes flashed with renewed anger, and her voice rose to a level that filled every corner of the studio. Like adults? Jimmy, adults don't lie to people to get them on their show. Adults don't send their employees to harass someone's team looking for gossip. And adults definitely don't try to shame someone into sitting down and taking it quietly, just because there are cameras rolling. The crowd was now buzzing with excitement and tension. They could sense that they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that would be talked about for years to come. This wasn't just a celebrity having a bad interview. This was a complete breakdown of the artificial politeness that usually governed these interactions. Jimmy made another attempt to de-escalate, but his voice was shaky and uncertain. I'm trying to apologize here. I'm trying to make this right. You're trying to save face, Rihanna shot back immediately. There's a difference. If you wanted to make this right, you would have called me the second you found out what your people were doing. Instead, you let me walk into this studio thinking I was coming here to talk about my businesses and my philanthropy work, not to be interrogated about my personal life. The host's composure was completely shattered now. Sweat was visible on his forehead, and his hands were trembling slightly as he gripped the edge of his desk. What do you want me to do? How do I fix this? Rihanna stared at him for a long moment, her expression a mixture of disappointment and disgust. You can't fix this, Jimmy. You can't take back the betrayal. You can't undo the fact that you turned what should have been a respectful conversation into a trap. She turned to face the audience directly, her voice carrying an authority that commanded absolute attention. You all came here tonight expecting to see a fun interview, and instead you're watching me defend my right to privacy and basic respect. That's not your fault. It's his. The crowd was hanging on every word. Some were clearly uncomfortable with the intensity of the confrontation, while others seemed energized by witnessing such unfiltered emotion from someone they had only ever seen in carefully controlled public appearances. Jimmy made one final attempt to salvage the situation. Rihanna, please, we can edit this out. We can start over. Just give me another chance. She laughed again, that same humorless sound that had chilled the studio earlier. Edit it out? Jimmy, do you see all those phones in the audience? Do you think this isn't already streaming live on social media? You can't edit out the truth once it's been spoken. The reality of what was happening seemed to hit Jimmy all at once. This wasn't just a bad interview that could be cleaned up in post-production. This was a public relations disaster that was unfolding in real time, being broadcast live and recorded by dozens of witnesses. I never meant for any of this to happen, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But it did happen, Rihanna replied firmly. And now you have to live with the consequences of treating people like content instead of human beings. She walked back toward her chair, but instead of sitting down, she reached for her purse that had been placed beside it. The gesture was clear to everyone in the room. She was preparing to leave. Jimmy's panic was now visible to everyone. Wait, please don't go. We can work this out. We can have a real conversation about whatever you want to talk about. Rihanna paused, her hand on her purse, and turned to look at him one more time. Jimmy, the time for real conversation was 3 days ago when your producer called my team. The time for respect was when I walked onto this stage trusting that you would treat me with basic human decency. That time has passed. The studio fell into complete silence, except for the sound of cameras continuing to roll and the quiet murmur of audience members whispering to each other. Everyone present knew they were witnessing something that would be remembered long after the credits rolled. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Rihanna finally spoke again, her voice cutting through the tension with devastating clarity. "You know what the worst part about all of this is, Jimmy? I actually respected you. I thought you were different from all the other hosts who see celebrities as nothing more than content to be consumed and discarded." Jimmy's face crumpled at her words. He seemed to age 10 years in that moment, the weight of her disappointment hitting him harder than her anger had. "I am different. This isn't who I am." "Then who are you?" she demanded, taking a step back toward him. "Because the person I'm looking at right now is someone who either knew exactly what his team was doing and approved it, or someone who's so disconnected from his own show that he has no idea what's being done in his name. Either way, that's not someone I can respect." The audience was completely captivated by the raw honesty of the exchange. This level of vulnerability and genuine emotion was something they had never seen on late-night television. People were recording not just for the drama, but because they recognized they were witnessing something authentic in a world of manufactured entertainment. Jimmy sat down heavily in his chair, running his hands through his hair. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I should know everything that happens on my show. I should protect my guests from this kind of thing. I failed you, and I'm sorry." For a moment it seemed like Rihanna might soften. Her expression shifted slightly, if she was considering whether his apology was genuine. But then she shook her head, her resolve hardening again. "Sorry doesn't undo the violation of trust, Jimmy. Sorry doesn't take back the fact that someone on your team thought it was acceptable to dig into my private life, looking for tabloid material. And sorry definitely doesn't excuse the fact that you sat there asking me those loaded questions without once thinking about where they might be coming from." She moved closer to his desk again, her presence commanding and unforgiving. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be constantly scrutinized, constantly judged, constantly having your every move analyzed and criticized? Do you know what it feels like to have people you trusted turn around and treat you like a commodity?" Jimmy looked up at her, his eyes showing genuine remorse. "No, I don't. I can't imagine what that's like." "Then let me educate you," Rihanna said, her voice taking on a teaching tone that was somehow more devastating than her anger had been. "It's exhausting. It's dehumanizing. And it makes you very, very careful about who you trust. So when someone you thought you could trust betrays that confidence, it doesn't just hurt. It reminds you why you have to keep your guard up in the first place." The host was visibly struggling with her words, clearly understanding for the first time the real impact of what had happened. "How do I make this right? There has to be something I can do." Rihanna studied his face for a long moment, as if she was trying to determine whether his remorse was genuine or just another performance. "You want to make it right? Here's how you make it right. You go back to your production team and you tell them that guests are human beings, not content to be exploited. You establish clear boundaries about what is and isn't acceptable when reaching out to celebrity representatives. And you never, ever let something like this happen again." She paused, her next words carrying the weight of finality. "But you don't get to make it right with me. That bridge has been burned." Jimmy's shoulders sagged in defeat. He looked around, the studio as if seeing it clearly for the first time, taking in the cameras, the audience, the artificial setup that had facilitated this betrayal. "I understand. I don't like it, but I understand." "Good," Rihanna said simply. She picked up her purse and slung it over her shoulder with the kind of decisive movement that indicated the conversation was over. "Then we're done here." As she turned to walk away, Jimmy made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "Rihanna, wait. Can I at least ask you to consider that not everyone on my team was involved in this? There are good people here who had nothing to do with what happened. She stopped walking but didn't turn around. Jimmy, that's exactly my point. If there are good people on your team, then you owe it to them to be a better leader. You owe it to them to create an environment where this kind of thing doesn't happen in the first place. When she did turn around, her expression had shifted from anger to something closer to pity. You have a platform that millions of people watch. You have the power to treat people with dignity or to tear them down for entertainment. What happened here tonight is what happens when you choose the wrong option. The studio was so quiet that the sound of her heels clicking against the floor as she walked toward the exit seemed amplified. Every step she took away from the interview setup felt like a nail in the coffin of what had once been a respected late-night talk show. Jimmy stood up abruptly, his voice cracking as he called after her. "This isn't how I wanted this to go. This isn't who I want to be." Rihanna paused at the edge of the stage, her hand on the curtain that would take her backstage and away from this disaster. For a moment, everyone in the studio held their breath, wondering if she might turn around one more time, if there might be some possibility of redemption or reconciliation. Instead, she spoke without turning around, her voice carrying clearly across the silent studio. "Then be better, Jimmy. Be the person you want to be instead of the person you've shown me tonight." And with that, she was gone, disappearing behind the curtain and leaving Jimmy standing alone on his own stage, facing an audience that had just witnessed the complete destruction of his carefully crafted television persona. The cameras kept rolling as Jimmy stood there in stunned silence, clearly unsure of how to proceed. The audience was equally uncertain, some people starting to clap uncertainly while others sat in shocked silence. This wasn't how talk show interviews were supposed to end. There was no pleasant wrap-up, no promotion of upcoming projects, no fake laughter to send everyone home feeling good. Jimmy finally walked back to his desk, his movements mechanical and defeated. He looked directly into the camera, his usual television confidence completely absent. "We're going to take a commercial break," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. But before the show could cut away, the sound of the studio door slamming echoed through the building, the final punctuation mark on a confrontation that had torn away the polite veneer of celebrity culture and revealed the raw human emotions underneath. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Social media exploded with clips and commentary. The entertainment industry was forced to reckon with questions about consent, privacy, and the treatment of guests on talk shows. And Jimmy Kimmel was left to figure out how to rebuild not just his show, but his reputation and his sense of who he wanted to be as a broadcaster. What started as a routine promotional interview had become a masterclass in accountability, a reminder that behind every celebrity is a human being who deserves basic respect and dignity. The question that everyone was left asking wasn't just what had happened that night, but what it revealed about the culture of entertainment itself. So what do you think? Was Rihanna justified in her explosive reaction, or should she have handled the situation differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that changed entertainment forever.